The big red button, and I forgot to do that. Anyway, I kind of set out after realizing how far behind I was to correct the problem, and so hopefully some of these learnings that I've learned will help you guys. We're not alone. I don't know if you guys know who Sarah Swedon is, but she is a really popular SVG particularly, but also to some degree JavaScript and front-end guru. And this was really conveniently tweeted like yesterday, which is basically what we're talking about. Like, holy crap, this is not slowing down. What do we do? And my answer to that came about an hour later in another tweet, which is basically you attend a conference to learn what you need to learn and where to start learning it. I cannot possibly hope to give you guys ECMAScript 2015 today, but hopefully we can point you in the right direction and teach you a little bit about some of the other APIs that are out there that are new to get you going. So to start, we're going to go through a little brief history of the JavaScript language. It all began back in 1995. Brendan Eich, as you guys know, or Eich, he wrote MochaScript in about 10 days, which was then renamed LiveScript in the beta version, which was then renamed JavaScript in the actual version. And this was Netscape Navigator 2.0, the first version of any browser with JavaScript. That's the first place it ever showed up. In 1997, they took the language to ECMA and created ECMAScript 1, which was the first standards body for our first standard of ECMA. In 1998, they revised that because they made some typos. Nothing significant, that's why it doesn't matter. And then ECMAScript 3 came out in 1999 with some really helpful little additions, try-catch and regular expression. That's basically the only things they added. And then we came to the bad years. And this is like the doldrums of JavaScript. In 2000, nothing happened. And in 2001, nothing happened. In 2002, nothing happened. In 2003, nothing happened. In 2004, nothing happened. So if you guys were web developers back then, you will remember this. Basically, JavaScript was like this little tiny pieces and parts. You would use it to for button clicks and cute little things like that, but it was not a significant language. That's actually not what was happening at the time. Really, Yahoo, Macromedia, and Microsoft were taking a collective dump on JavaScript, and in particular the ECMAScript standards. They tried to come out with ECMAScript 4, which was JavaScript version 2. It was a backwards incompatible version of JavaScript that introduced a whole bunch of mumbo-jumbo. Most of it got thrown in the trash can because some people like Brendan didn't want it, or they were pushing for other versions of it. But the moral of the story is nothing happened here. And in future versions of JavaScript, you guys might have heard the word harmony. That's what came out of this. This was disharmony. And so when they finally resolved it, they called it Harmony. And to this day in Node.js, Harmony is like a flag you can add to use the latest versions of JavaScript. So next came some dissatisfaction with JavaScript and the age that I will call the rise of the libraries. In 2005, this guy, Jesse James Garrett, decided JavaScript didn't need to suck quite as bad as it did. And so he coined the term AJAX in a white paper. AJAX, as you guys know, is just a way to go fetch some content off another server. Pretty soon that led to libraries like Prototype, Scriptaculous, Dojo Toolkit, and then in 2006, John Resig changed everything, right? He came out with jQuery, and we've been with that pretty much ever since. So jQuery came out, but that wasn't the end of it. We got MooTools, Yahoo User Interface Library. In 2000, nothing happened in 2007. If you guys know something that happened in the JavaScript world in 2007, let me know, because I could not find a thing. 2008, Raphael.js, which was kind of one of the first pioneering, let's actually make things look cool in JavaScript. And then the big one, Chrome hit. And the reason Chrome was a big one is because it had the V8 engine in it, which was a powerhouse JavaScript interpreter that, importantly, could be extracted from Chrome. 2009 was a big year. This is the Harmony year, kind of. A bunch of the people on the ECMAScript team decided let's get rid of all of these divisive things and just do the things we can agree upon. So ECMAScript 5 had some really handy things like object create, isArray, index of. You guys are probably familiar with this, and JSON support. Yay! And you know, we're basically now just being able to use this stuff because browsers. But really, what happened in 2009, the really big thing, was Node.js, and I can't scroll my presenter notes, so I can't tell you the guy's name, but Node.js came out. Finally, somebody plucked that V8 engine out of a browser and made it run on the command line. He presented at JSConf in Europe, and to standing ovation because it was such an innovative new idea. And so, you know, that's less than 10 years ago. And then we really went on a wild ride. The next period of time I'll call the age of NPM, and this one's really important too. Isaac Schulter built NPM basically by himself in 2010. It's the first package manager for JavaScript. And as you guys know now, if you're doing much PHP work, Composer has completely changed PHP. Right now, we don't worry about writing like everything all over again. We just pluck the packages we need, put them together, and we're off to the races. The same thing happened with JavaScript. First, we needed a way to require modules. Require.js was probably the most well-accepted version of this, implementing the common JS method of require and then your script name. So then that was able to lead to things that bundled lots of stuff together, like Express, which was the first, in my opinion, the first great framework for writing web applications. But it didn't stop there. Then we ended up getting Backbone and Knockout and Zepto and Mustache and Moment and Ember and Meteor and Jasmine and Bower and Grunt and Underscore, and then the big guys started getting into it, and we ended up with Angular and Gulp, and in 2013 React, and then Webpack, and then Browserify and Passport, Babel, Vue.js. It started getting really crazy, and to some degree it's almost silly to talk about it because through this time you can see that in all the packages in the world, JavaScript all of a sudden starts taking off and very quickly catching up with what at the time was the really cool kid on the block, Ruby. And that led to renewed interest in JavaScript. Finally, 2015, we get ECMAScript 6, which is what we're going to spend most of the day talking about. But really, this is the age of JavaScript, because no longer was JavaScript the language of like web developers. It started taking over everything, and we started being able to actually iterate on this quickly. 2016, we got ECMAScript 7. In 2017, ECMAScript 8. And now we're looking at ES Next, which is basically the term we use for anything that's not here yet. So that will become, if they resolve in 2018 or 2019, that'll be ECMAScript 9, and Next will move on, if that makes sense. This is what happened after that. So you saw our chart up to 2014. This is from 2015 on. Basically, JavaScript is eating the world. It is taking over everything very quickly. So, actually this was in, I think, 2008 maybe, Jeff Atwood, the guy who started Stack Overflow, said any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. It's his little law, and it seems to be holding true, right? I mean, there's virtually nothing that's not written in JavaScript, at least at some level. So let's see a little bit about these changes. Now we're going to get a little bit nerdy in the weeds, put on your coding hat and try to follow, but we're going to talk about some of these language level changes. What was in ECMAScript? We had arrow functions, classes, enhanced object literals, template strings, destructuring, default rest spread, let constant iterators, for generators, Unicode, module loaders, map sets, proxies, symbols, subclasses, updated math, updated object, upstring, binary, promises, reflection APIs, and tail calls. I have picked out a few of my favorites, although really all of them are pretty fundamental. These are ones that if you're not like writing React, if you're writing React, these are all really important. If you are a Drupal developer who wants to write better websites, these ones in particular, and I'll throw in like it's just so small that it's not life-changing. Like pretty much all of those green ones, you use like every other line of code, you're going to be using something like that. So we're going to build up to it a little bit here. We're going to start at arrow functions. Arrow functions are, I just can't live without them. Like, it's driving me crazy that we don't have them in PHP yet, although there is a proposal for the next version of PHP 7, 7.3, not 2, to have it included. So here's hoping. All right, here's with ES5, ECMAScript 5, that one that came way back in 2009. This is how you would write a map function, which was a new feature at the time. So we're going to square all of those numbers, and we have a map. We pass a closure function into it. We accept n, and then return n times n. Makes a lot of sense. In ECMAScript 6, this is how you write an arrow function. It's really simple. You basically put your parentheses around the arguments you want to accept. The arrow there, the fat arrow, just means what's coming next is the function code, and then you have the function code, and you return it just like normal. Now there's a little caveat here, which is you can actually write this like this. If you only accept one argument, you don't need the parentheses. And if you're performing a single expression, you don't need to return. It automatically returns. So that bottom line of code is completely equivalent to that top line of code. Virtually equivalent. There's a small difference we'll get to here. There's two small differences. Arrow functions do not have a prototype. So here you have a typical function. I've made a little car object, and I'm console logging, and you can see I have the prototype. I have the car object as part of my prototype. If I did the same thing with an arrow function, I'd get undefined. So they're really intended to be used as these small little closures. You're not building big classes with them. Let's get a little more complicated here. So here I've got my car, the same car object. I've included some nice little things like the speed, how long it's been driving, and then a report of how far it's driven at any given point in time. And then at the bottom there, I initialize it. This is ES5, the old way of writing it, so to speak. Although I see I let a let slip in there because I'm so used to typing it. That should be a var. That's ES6. In ES6, we would simplify this pretty dramatically. Importantly, take a look here on 5, and that set interval there. You have that function, and you can see that I've had to take this, assign it to that for use inside, right? Because this gets rebound inside of my function, which sounds a little nerdy, but it's really important, right? Like you guys have probably written some code similar to that 100 times if you've done like jQuery stuff. You know, var that equals this, or var, you know, whatever, car equals this. ECMAScript 6 with arrow functions, that's no longer required. If you use an arrow function, this maintains its binding to its parent object. That's dramatic, mind-blowing. Like it seems like a small thing. I promise it's huge. It's huge. The let there variable is another little piece of something new. That's as opposed to var. There are, I think, 2 new ones, let and const. Const is a constant, and let is a variable that only maintains scope within whatever block of code it's in. So outside of my function there, D would not be equal to anything, or if I had, let's say, a loop inside of there or something like that, it would not be, or like an if statement. Outside of the if statement, it would not be available. So it's bound to a tighter area. So they're really good to use when you can. It keeps stuff from getting polluted. Another small one that is also pretty life-changing is template strings. So here I've got my script again, and you can see it's pretty much identical to where it was. On the bottom there, where you see prototype report, I've got my console log. I have this car. And I've got a distance that I'm driving in miles. I've added one other little thing there, which is I've added the ability to pass in your car on my main function. And so where I'm creating a new ES car going 60 miles an hour, I could have passed a second parameter of an emoji, and it would have passed that emoji through and used it, right? So I've got there on line number 2, this car equals car or car. In other words, this is how we did default variables, default arguments in ES5. If you guys are familiar with doing that, or you can do type of equals undefined, you reassign the value you need, right? Super obnoxious. ES6, we have PHP like default car equals emoji. So that's how you do a default there. But the template string is this part down here on the console log at the bottom. Console log this car, distance in miles. You see I'm using tick marks instead of regular quote marks or double quotes. That means that inside of there, I can put direct template interpolation or variable interpolation with that $sign and the brackets. That's not like some library. I didn't install handlebars. That's just built in out of the box. That actually runs in like almost every browser now. So a lot of these things are actually usable today. It runs in pretty much every version of Node. So most of this code is available. All of this code is available to download on GitHub. It was a URL at the beginning, and I'll show it at the end again. And all of these can run in Node, and you can play with them yourself. So again, there's that default. Pretty sweet. All right, classes. This is another new feature, really cool. Finally makes it look like a real language, right? Haha, gotcha, it's not. This is just syntactic sugar, but it's delicious sugar. So you have your class ESCar there, and then you get inside of there, you can write methods by just saying the name. So that constructor there, that is a constructor. That would be what would normally go inside of your function back here. So you can see how that code changed. It just went inside of the constructor. If I wanted to write another function, or a method in this case, as part of ESCar, I would just add another line underneath constructor and write the name. You don't have to say function or anything. You just write the name, take your arguments, and you're off. So that is really, really nice. There's nothing actually new here. It all just maps to prototype behind the scenes. And you can't actually do properties yet. The only way you can do properties is like I did there in the constructor, but there's proposals for properties to be included in future versions of ECMAScript. And since we're moving so fast, I think we'll see it. Destructuring. It's one of my favorites. You guys might be familiar with this now from PHP, but it's some wonderful stuff that has not been in JavaScript yet. So here we've got some triplets. We're just printing out their names, and we're passing them in as an array. And so in ECMAScript 5, or ES5, you would say name 0, name 1, name 3, or that should be 2, bug, 0, 1, and 2. And that would print out, first name, second name, third name. This is no longer necessary. We now can pull them out by their respective index in the array right in the argument parameter there. So that is really sweet. You can basically already do this in PHP to some degree. You can't do it so much in the arguments, but you can do it with the list. It's basically like list is in PHP. So that seriously simplifies what you're doing. You can also write this outside of arguments. So here I've got an image with some dimensions. Again, that's just a zero-based array, right? 0 is 1200, 1 is 400, and 2 is the URL. And when I assign it here to another array, it takes the indexes and assigns them to those variables. So after this point, I would have width is the value of 1200, height is the value of 400, and those variables become available for use anywhere. All right, and let's see, one more destructuring here. Here I'm destructuring, I'm going to destructure an object. So you've got square, another asynchronous square, where I have a set timeout, so I'm going to square these numbers after 100 milliseconds, after waiting for 100 milliseconds. So you've got basically two arguments being passed in through the form of an object, numbers and callback, and I've got them up there in options, and you can see I have to reference options.numbers and options.callback in order to get access them. With ES6, we seriously simplify that, and now we can just reference them instead of by their index, by their key, their property name. So numbers and callback, really, really cool stuff. REST spread, this is kind of in the same vein as the last one, except it's a little bit inverse. So you see here in ES5, I have, I'm going to take the first two numbers. This is a super weird function that I had to write to display this, or to demo this, but you take the first two numbers, 3 and 8, you square them and add them together, and then you take the last numbers and add it to the total, okay? So, 3 times 3 is 9, 8 times 8 is 4, and then add 1, 2, 3, and 4 to that. So the way we did that is by the problem is that you can pass as many numbers in as you want, right? So we have to access the magic arguments variable, which inside of JavaScript, if you pass in a bunch of arguments to a function, they're all available in this like magic arguments variable, okay? And so I had to slice that. I had to slice the first two off, and square and take the rest of them and add them to a number to be summed together. It's a little esoteric, but. So here we have it in ES6. You can see I took my first argument, my second argument, and then I said dot, 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 give me the rest of them. So no matter how many arguments we pass in there, the rest of them are all going to get packed into that to sum. And that's really useful because now I can write my entire function in 3 lines of code. Here's another one. Sorry. So in this case, we're getting a bunch of random numbers, and we're going to sum them up. So I wrote a little random number generator, and it's going to be of a random variable length, and all we're going to do is sum it up. And so in this case, this is particularly hard to do in JavaScript, as opposed to the last example where I was giving you a predefined number of things. I had like 1, 2, 3, 4 as additional arguments to pass. In this instance, I'm passing a lot of additional arguments. So this would be like a PHP call user func array, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to call a function with a lot of different variables. So in previous versions of JavaScript, you do that sum.apply, and then you pass the first argument is what you want this to be bound to, and the second argument is an array of things that you want to pass into the respective argument positions of a function. There's no easy way to explain that, I promise. But that's what you do. And so again, we're in the sum, we're accessing our arguments, which is just this magic variable full of arguments, and we're working our way through it. This is like super garbage spaghetti code, but that's the way that JavaScript's been written for a really long time. This is why people hate JavaScript, is junk like this. So here we go. ES6, we just do dot, 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 get some numbers. And what that does is it takes the array that's being passed in there, destructures it out into all of the arguments that are going into sum, and then I'm using the inverse of that. So the one at the bottom there would be called the spread operator. The one at the top there, dot, 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 rx, that's the rest operator, where I'm taking all of the arguments and I'm packing them into a variable. And so here I can pass however many arguments I want to my function, and they'll all come back in one variable. Really cool. Generators. All right. So this one is easily the hardest thing to wrap your head around, I think. So I try to break this out in the most simple way possible. A generator is basically a function that pauses itself, maintains its state until it's called again. The return from a generator is an object with 2 properties. One that says the value, and the other one that is just end. I think it's what it is. End is true or end is false. That's all it is. If you implement that interface, you can use a bunch of JavaScript features that implement that. So like for of, if you implement the generator interface, you can use a for of loop, which is one of the new things. So you could loop over a function, which you can't do in the past. And so here you can see I've done it as simple as possible. You use that little star next to the function name. It's not a pointer like in C. It just means this is a generator. And then you have this new keyword, yield. And basically, the first time we call counter.next, or count, we assign it there to count.next, it runs the next, whatever the next yield statement is. So the first time we call it, we get 1. The second time we call it, we get 2. The third time we call it, we get 3. The fourth time we call it, we've run out of things to do. And so it just kind of dies there. If we put a return statement there, it would return whatever the return is forever. So it gets a little bit more complicated than this, though. By the way, I'm not showing you. Oh, that's the same slide. Is it? No, it's not. So here I'm doing the same thing, but I am logging out the entire object so you can see what's inside of it. So there's value 1 done as false, value 2 done as false, value 3 done as false. And then the fourth time we run it, it says done's true. Does that make sense? All right, good, because it's going to get harder. Here we're going to do the Fibonacci sequence, and we're going to do it with a generator. So I created this little function here to take the total number of Fibonacci numbers that we want and to create a generator for it. And we're using a loop here. So instead of saying yield 1, yield 2, yield 3, we use a loop. And the loop, every time we call it, it will resume right after that loop. Then we're using the for of loop there. That's not for in, which is what everybody's used to. For of does not give you the index of what you're iterating. It gives you the value of what you're iterating. There's no way to get the index out of it. So that's perfect for something like this because there is no index, right? There's no index of whatever my generator is doing. In the last scenario, I only had 3 of them in there, but there could be 1,000,000 of these things, right? So there is no index. And then all we do is just say, for n of my 50 Fibonacci sequence, run. The first time it goes through, it's going to generate and return 0. And it basically will resume the second time it goes through from where yield is, and then run the loop from there and then stop at yield again until yield gets called again. This is really, really great for intensive processing tasks where you're doing something and then you can pause for a while and then do something later. So you're seeing this show up a lot in things like React or Vue and the internals, but also in a lot of like Ajax-y kind of stuff. Because you can call a function, have it do some work, and then call the function again at some other point and have it resume after some operation has taken place. All right, and then my personal favorite out of all of them is promises. Hopefully you guys have encountered promises at some point. Although promises, sadly, are going to be going out the door with another version of JavaScript because we just can't stop. Here is, but don't worry about that. They have a lot of life, I promise. Here is how we would do an asynchronous fetch. I'm not actually doing a call here. I'm not like actually doing an Ajax call. I'm just setting a timeout for some random amount of time and then saying that we connected to the URL, right? Really simple code. So this is how we would have done this with ES5. We would have passed a callback through. So I'm fetching google.com, I'm giving it a callback, and I'm saying, when you're done doing whatever you're doing, let me know. This is how we would do it with a promise. My function fetch returns a promise immediately. And it itself contains a closure that when it's done, calls resolve. So a promise receives 2 arguments, resolve and reject. I said request should be reject. Resolve and reject. You call reject, which is my second argument that I foolishly call request, if there's a problem and you just like want to notify, hey, there's an issue here, it's going to stop the promise, shut it down, move on. On the other hand, you have resolve. You call that when things are done. Okay? The reason this is really powerful is that if you write libraries or anything else where you're doing something asynchronous, you return a promise. And when you return a promise, you can then you don't care about what's happening in the internals. You don't have to pass a callback or anything like that. You can use this beautiful .then. All right, so I call fetch. Fetch returns a promise, which is an object that has a .then method on it. I then pass a function into that to console log it. The cool thing is, whatever you return out of a then method is another promise that's already resolved. So you can just chain these. You can say .then, 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 and do whatever the heck you want on them. If you return a promise from a .then, it will wait until it's done with that one to call the next .then. This is opposed to this garbage, particularly this garbage right down here. See that? That's called callback hell, which means we're passing a callback. We have 3 things we want to do here in sequence. We want to do the first one, we want to wait till it's done. We want to do the second one, we want to wait till it's done. We want to do the third one, we want to wait till it's done. The way we would have to do it in the past is pass a function in. It would call that function, which would then call our next function, which would then call that function we passed, and then call the next function. It's like super crazy. We can now replace that with this beautiful code. So you can see I create my progress bar that says I'm deleting all your files. And I then .then, and I call progress bar again in my second one. Again, that's going to return a promise. So when my second one returns a promise, it's going to wait until it's done to call the next .then. So it says, just kidding, achieving your deleted files. And then that .then says, whoops, hold on, trying to figure out where they went. And then the last .then just console logs, terribly sorry, mate, here's all your files are gone. So all that sequence of events was previously this horrible callback hell. And now we can have this beautiful flat sequence of venables. They're called venables. Whoops. All right, so this is another really great feature, which I'm going to call concurrency, although there are other words for it. where basically we want to do a bunch of things at the same time. This is like mind-bendingly hard to do in ES5. Basically, I want to make 3 requests. When all the requests are done, I then want to do something, right? So how would you do that? Well, you'd make a request, you'd have a callback in there that increments some integer, and when that integer is incremented 3 times, we then know it's done, and at that point, we then call whatever we need to call, right? It's like super obnoxious. So you can see I'm doing that there. OnComplete, I'm calling this onComplete function, and then I'm tracking with my results every time one completes. And then when I get to 3 or more results being done, then I say all my results are done. This is pretty fragile code. If I add another one of these, I got to go in there and like change the number of times it's iterated. You can imagine some ways that you could get around this, but essentially this is the process. With a promise, I can take a bunch of things that are promised and just say promise all. When all of these things are done, let me know. The great thing here is like the previous code, but in a much more beautiful way, I can send out 3 HTTP requests at the exact same time. I'm not waiting for the first one to come back to then call the next one. I'm sending them all at the same time. When they're all done, do something. There's another one called promise.race that I'm not showing you, which is the same as this, except it'll call when the first one is done. So if you want to run 3 requests and you want to be notified when any of those are done, you can do it with promises as well. All right, probably the capstone of ES5 is modules. So here's CommonJS. There's a lot of different module loaders. CommonJS is easily the most popular one because it's essentially built into Node, but it's this little require. So I've got 2 files, got my library, got my main. I require the file out of my library and I execute it. This has been replaced with that. So I have an export. I'm going to export a default. If you export a default, you can only do 1. In this case, I'm exporting a function, and I'm just importing it. Import in my other file from wherever. Of all the things that I've shown you, this is the only one that's not implemented in any browser or in Node.js. But it is probably the most, one of the most popular things about it. So we'll get into a little bit how to deal with that. But essentially, you got to compile this into ES5 code right now, which is actually really easy to do. Here's an example of named exports. So I'm doing the exact same thing, except that in my CommonJS, I'm exporting a square and a cube object. So I can then import those, requiring my library, and then I'm popping them off, math.square, math.cube, right? In ES6, it's much cleaner. You just export the functions you want to export, and then you use that object destructuring we learned about to pull them out. So there I'm doing import, and then my curly braces, square and cube. And I'm just pulling those right out. So I could just pull out one of them if I wanted to. This is really popular on big libraries like underscore. So when you use ES6 with something like underscore and you need, let's say, clone deep or something like that, you can just say, give me clone deep. And it will not import the rest of underscore. It'll import clone deep, which is really great. It's also why it's really hard to do and why nobody's implemented yet. This is what you're going to get right now if you try to run it. In the example code, which you guys can download from GitHub if you want to learn some of this stuff, I have included all of the stuff that you need to compile or transpile this into ES5, so you can see what that looks like. Let's talk a little bit about those tools. We can use ES 2015, 16, 17, 18, a bunch of ES Next features that aren't actually written yet. We do that today. We basically need to transform something like this. I've got my little arrow function, and I want to transform that into that, right? Because that's ES5. There's basically 2 ways to do this. There's a lot more ways to do this. One of the things about JavaScript right now is it's growing so fast. You have to be really diligent to pick the right tools. Because if you pick the wrong tools, it's going to be obsolete in like a matter of months. So I would recommend if you find a tool to do the job, keep looking a little bit and see, is this really what is the most popular thing right now? So like basically I won't use a package anymore without going to the commit log and seeing have there been commits recently, how many stars does it have on GitHub, how many downloads does it have? Like you've got to look into this stuff because projects are dying left and right, as you would imagine, with almost 500,000 projects out there. And you really, really need to be careful about which ones you're picking or you're going to be left in the dust. So the right one to pick is Babel. Traceur's great. Traceur's actually made by Google, which is kind of ironic. But Babel's the right one. It's got all the momentum behind it. So after we, and basically you pass a file in, it spits it out as ES5. That's about as complicated as Babel. It's really pretty simple. But we have a bigger problem, which is now we've got all of these import files. Like we've got tons of JavaScript files. We've got our library split up because we're using, even if we're using CommonJS or if we're using ES6 imports, we're not writing like one big JavaScript file that's going to go into our Drupal installation or other installation. We're writing lots of beautiful, tiny little files constructed to do just what they're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, if you pushed up this many HTTP requests to your website, that'd be a serious problem. So we need a way to bundle these together into something like that. That's ultimately where we want to get. There's two options again. There are, again, many more options. These are the two big ones, although there's another one coming on the scene called Rollup. The right option is Webpack. Pick that one. Webpack is amazing. You can compile all of your JavaScript down. You can have it automatically do image compression. You can have it do your Sass compiling. You can have it do everything. But I promise, if you try to write your own configuration, you will spend days doing it. I promise. It is so hard. I'm pretty sure there's like 3 people in the world that could sit down and type one of these things out. I wrote this one for Drupal, actually. And it's available in that package as well. Let me scroll in here. Oh, that's convenient. So it goes on for a while, as you can see, and it is non-trivial, is what I'll say. So don't do that. There are tons of great people out there who have written wonderful Webpack starters. I would probably use one of them. You're welcome to use this one. If you want to learn it, like go for it. But it does get pretty complicated. That's what I'll say. So this is basically how you start using it today. You know, in this particular file, I've got it included in my Drupal's root directory. I have a theme, in this case called my theme. And I am compiling my JavaScript assets in that theme into another folder, and then that's the folder that Drupal's including for my CSS and my JavaScript. And I write ES6 for Drupal. I pretty much don't use jQuery. I can even leave, in Drupal 8, we can actually eject jQuery from the front end if we want to. We're doing that on a project right now. And you pretty much don't need to use anything else. I'm also having it compile all my Sass for me and basically do Sass pre-processing and do post-CSS post-processing on it to auto-prefix and do all that other fun stuff. But there is one other thing that I just want to briefly touch on. Hopefully you guys know some things you might want to go learn now on ES6. The other thing is these web APIs, and these are kind of outside of, they're a little bit harder to stay up to date on, honestly, because they're not coming from ECMAScript because they're based on browser things. So it's a lot of W3C people coming up with this stuff. But web APIs are hugely popular. Some of the most recent updates come in the form of query selectors. This is one of the reasons you can pretty much ditch JavaScript now, because if we're all honest, the things that we use jQuery for, did I say JavaScript? We can ditch jQuery. The things we use jQuery for is pretty much selecting, right? We use it as a selector all the time. We use it for observing events. We use it for AJAX. So you should be using, you should be using Axios package now in ES6. That's a package, AXIOS. You should be doing all your AJAX with that. It uses promises instead, way cleaner, super beautiful. You can/should be using the native query selectors to be doing all of your selecting. You can use add event listener to be doing all of your event listening. I will say that the edge case, which unfortunately I think a lot of people are in because slow, big organizations, is most of this stuff becomes available around IE11. So we recently stopped supporting IE8 and back, which IE10 doesn't exist. But if you're okay with dropping support for everything but IE11, then almost all of this is available to you right now. Nobody has to download anything. It does not come with any client patch whatsoever. So let's look at a couple quick examples. This is in jQuery, how I would get, I got a bunch of lists and I want to get the first one. This is how you do it now with the query selector API. Really not that much more verbose. You can use, it's pretty much got the same jQuery syntax. You know, that's a class there for list. In fact, the syntax is like exactly the same. It's basically CSS selectors. You know, here I'm going to get a whole bunch of lists. I can do query selector all, and I'll get a bunch of them, or list items. Here I can add a class. This has been a serious pain in JavaScript. If you guys have tried to write your own add class in the past, because you have to parse the class attribute. No longer. Now we have class list, item.class list. You can see that iterating over my classes is a little bit more complicated here because I'm using that array.from and I'm passing that in. That just takes my query selector all and makes it into an array that I can map or do whatever I want. So you will use that a lot, or maybe you could write a little function to just do that little chunk of code so it's not quite as verbose. But basically, that removes most of the need for jQuery. The other one is, you know, button events. Or any events. So this would be how I would listen to a click in jQuery, and here's how I would listen to a click natively. It's really not that different, right? And again, jQuery comes with a cost, and that comes with zero cost. So here's some other really fun ones. There's now an animation API where you can animate objects on the screen using pure JavaScript. Device acceleration, you can detect the acceleration of a device. You can detect the light, proximity. There's a new fetch, which is available in quite a few browsers now. That's basically a brand new Ajax API that lets you just say like fetch this URL and it returns a promise. So it's almost like Axios. It doesn't have quite as good support yet, so I'd still use Axios for now. There's a gamepad API. It gets pretty crazy. Payment request, performance push, service workers, speech recognition, which I'm really curious about. URL, there's a virtual reality API, WebGL, WebSockets, wheel events. These are all things that are shipping in browsers right now. So JavaScript in the browser world, you know, first we were talking about JavaScript at the language level. In the browser world, it's exploding as well. So what do we do about JavaScript fatigue? We suck it up, and we work really hard to stay on top of it. I'd recommend trying to figure out who the core contributors are to all the packages that you're particularly interested in. If you're a React person, go find them on Twitter and start following them. If you know some people that are, you know, really popular in the Drupal world, I would try to follow them too. That you pretty much have to try to stay on top of it. There's like, I wish I could say like I've got the solution, but I don't. The one thing that you can do, I think, more than anything else, is pick the right packages. I can't emphasize that enough. You got to pick the right packages, and that can be really challenging. So, you know, if you have some trusted voices who are really into the world, ask them. You are welcome to shoot me an email or hit me up on Twitter or whatever. And then up there is the URL to all the code if you guys want to take a peek. And I also include on there that Webpack for Drupal and kind of like a starter theme that has nothing in it using Webpack. And it works out of the box. I tested it 5 minutes before I came in here. So you should be able to get a Drupal site going with ES6 JavaScript and CSS, SAS. Questions? Yes?
So you mentioned incorporating SAS compilation into your Webpack build. Does that replace Gulp altogether, or?
Yeah, so again, picking your packages, Gulp is no longer cool. Awesome. Yeah, so the cool thing now is using NPM directly.
Okay.
So if you, let me see here if I can give you a little peek here behind the scenes. Oh, gotta get out of this guy. Hey, there we go. This is the package.json file, and you can see there I've got my scripts, dev, and build. And what I'm doing is I'm calling the node module, Webpack, binary file, well, kind of like binary file. And I've got a watcher, and then I've got a builder. And that's basically my Gulp now. So yes, it does, NPM technically is replacing Gulp, and then Webpack is replacing all of the Gulp utilities that you used to use.
have a question.
Yeah.
How about theming with the JavaScript?
About what? Theming?
Yes.
What about it? Like theming the actual page, or?
What do you think about theming using JavaScript? And is there an active library?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are actually doing that right now. The most recent site that we're building, we have Drupal pushing out a REST API, and we're doing the entire theme with Vue.js, 100%. And we actually aren't using any of the rendering functions for the Drupal theme whatsoever. So that's a possibility too. It's 100% JavaScript front end.
Can you show us all that?
Sure.
What JS can you
Yeah.
say?
What's that? Vue.js? Yeah. Specifically, I mean, this is kind of like beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but specifically, we're using something called Nuxt.js, which is a Vue.js server and compiler. So you can write Vue components, and it will render them on the back end, server side, and on the front end. It's like magic in a bottle.
You went over it sort of quickly, but most of your examples you've been running not in the web browser's console,
Yeah.
but in the terminal
Right.
on Node. Which if you've used any Node packages, they're both, you've got Node installed, and so you're running it from the terminal instead of from the console.
Let's see where I have this. All right. I'll give you guys a sneak peek. I think I didn't run dev on this. So this is Webpack doing its thing. There it's building its modules. All right, this is like very much a work in progress, but I'll show you. Here's a website we're doing for University of Virginia. This is built completely with front-end JavaScript and the back-end's all Drupal. You can see this is like the information that's coming out of the API that we're working with while we're building it, so it's not particularly beautiful, but that's kind of the idea. Let's see here. Cannot step there. So, for example, here's a page. So all of this was fetched from the API. We brought it in. We rendered it. In this case, we rendered it on the server. And are any of these links? All right. So there was a link to a person. You notice that that was particularly quick. It's because it had prefetched some of that, stored it in a local cache. When we clicked on it, it rendered it on the front end, replaced the state with a history API. And then loaded any additional data that it needed to right there.
And the database there isn't local.
The database is local. Yeah, it's not local. So the potential performance gains, it's external. The potential performance gains for stuff like this are pretty ridiculous. That was a whole new page load there. It didn't look like it, but it was. Boom. Boom. Pretty cool. The data's already there, so it's just doing a replace state on the screen.
Go back to
Basically.
the home page. The next layer of power is that you can start transitioning between pages. So a really small thing here is that it's a new page load, and the header just transitions. But when you start applying that across a whole page,
Right.
you've got a single page application with Drupal content management.
Pretty cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned roll-up coming onto the scene. Heard about that.
Yeah.
Do you see that becoming one that you would actually circle and say, this is now the one you think we should be using?
Maybe. I would say that Browserify is out right now, and I would say that Rollup is the young kid on the block. And so if I was putting all my money on it, I would stick with Webpack for quite a while. They just came out with a version 2, and they've got a lot of buy-in from basically from Facebook. They're not technically all bound up together like they are with React. But I would say that Webpack is the safe bet right now for the long term, and Rollup is really interesting to look at. It has a few small advantages. There's some anecdotal signs that it might be able to compress things a little bit more, but and the syntax is not as ridiculous. So that's a real thing. Some of these packages are so hard to use right now that whoever comes out with a cleaner API is like quickly comes in, which is basically why Vue.js has a shot at anything. Because if you're doing web stuff, it's easier to use. It just is. Like React people argue that. I've written both. It's easier to use if you're doing web stuff. React's advantage is like you could potentially create a native app out of it. Like it's got longer legs maybe in the long run. But if you're doing web stuff, Vue's super easy to use, and they're kind of capitalizing on that by, you know, you can start using Vue in a matter of hours. So since a lot of you are probably PHP people, if you've used Laravel comes with built-in support for Vue. Like out of the box, you don't have to do any of the compiling stuff. You don't have to do it's 100%. You just do npm run hot, and you get hot module reloading right away, right out of the box. It's really cool. So that's like the best PHP gateway drug into that JavaScript front end stuff. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you guys for spending some time.